Now I will introduce our moderator. Dr. Sheila Hurst has a doctorate in education and has consulted on and written Rotary District and global grants for health, education, and literacy projects in Kenya, China, Nigeria, and Zambia, and has made almost 40 trips to sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and South America for Rotary projects. She has served as a co-chair and a director of the Health Education and Wellness Rotary Action Group, District 5160 International Service Chair, and the leader of 2 vocational training teams. Welcome, Sheila.
Thank you, Regina. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to introduce our 2 panelists. Dr. Noel Q. Aligio of the Rotary Club of San Pablo City, Laguna, Philippines, has nearly 30 years of experience as a family physician. His medical interests include immunization programs, asthma control, diabetes, hypertension, tuberculosis, and dengue prevention. A Rotarian for more than 25 years, Noel has served as club president, club foundation chair, assistant governor, PETS chair, and district grants subcommittee chair. Our second panelist, Lynn Duckham, has worked professionally with heads of state, industry, donors, and communities in 29 countries over the past 30 years and uses these skills as a member of the Rotary Foundation cadre of technical advisors. She evaluates and provides advice on the development, management, and sustainability of Rotary Global Grant projects, programs, and proposals. Of recent time, this has been for programs being implemented in Australia, Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, Thailand, Timor-Leste, Taiwan, and Cambodia. This 5-part series is designed to support you as you cultivate effective projects that will create a sustainable impact in your community and around the world. These webinars offer tools and strategies to help you plan, find resources for, implement, and evaluate your projects. We may reference content from earlier webinars. So if you didn't have a chance to participate in the earlier sessions, you may be interested in watching the recordings. Through our conversation, we hope to help you, number 1, waiting for the next slide. There we go. There it is. We hope to help you, number 1, understand the connection between measurement and sustainability. Number 2, learn how to gather data to measure your progress. Number 3, use data to determine what changes you might need to make to your project plan. So let's consider this question. What is the connection between measurement and sustainability? You know, we're encouraged to measure the results of our service projects and to ensure that the benefits of the project remain long after project funding ends. However, it's important to see the link between the 2. Noel and Lynn, could you share how you've seen this connection in service projects that you've been part of?
Thank you, Sheila. A project built on a well-designed plan will definitely produce long-term results, as discussed on webinar number 2. An example is our technical vocational project for senior high schools in the Philippines in order to provide skills to students and qualify them for vocational work. It's a collaboration of the Department of Health, schools divisions, the school itself, and the Rotary Club. We identified the school's capacities, strengths, and also their limitations, and came up with a project design to fill in the gaps of the program. Included in the project design are data gathering and collection, done also by the school with defined parameters agreed upon by the stakeholders. With this data, the project was always placed in focus of its goals, bringing in more workforce and enrollees to the school, and with equipments provided, the project was able to produce qualified workforce for national certification levels. Stakeholders realized that they were right on track because they were able to attain their objectives. We had feedback meetings to assess the progress of the project and make necessary adjustments, especially during the pandemic. Data gathering and feedback meetings are essential to keep the program in check. So, with empowered stakeholders holding proper motivation to monitor their progress and continue on learning will produce long-lasting results. Now, the next slide, which is the building blocks to impact, you will notice that this diagram here shows that the impact of the theory of change. We want you to be able to define your inputs, outputs, expected outcomes, and intended long-term positive change, or what we call impact, that the project seeks to accomplish. A theory of change may sound intimidating, but it is simply an explanation of how a program will achieve an intended impact and in what circumstances. In the next slide, when designing a project, we should not be satisfied with grand numbers, but we are to measure beyond the numbers, seek to change and improve lives with change that is lasting. So let us apply these building blocks to my previous example. Our output would be increased in number of enrolled students in vocational courses, and with further inputs of training provided by the school to produce qualified graduates for national certification, able to apply for work, this being our outcome. And by this model and data gathered by the school on the number of graduates with jobs, this will be adopted by the City Schools Division to be applied to all city high schools in the city. This will be the project's impact. How about you, Lynn?
Pardon me. Thanks, Noel. I think just building on what you're saying, I think it's really important that we have well thought through and research projects. And having that, we're more likely to have sustainable results. So to see the impact of our work, we need to measure what is happening, and we need to do that ongoing throughout the project, as well as right at the beginning and right at the end. And in fact, even after that, so a couple of years later. Measurement builds on the foundations of sustainability, and it's really, really important we do that. Being able to measure and to demonstrate long-term results is not just about being able to brag about how good we are. It is about being able to teach us about the different situations and opportunities. It's also about allowing us to understand some of the challenges that have been happening and to make that positive difference. Things keep changing. We know that. Politics, floods, COVID-19, fires, earthquakes, extended droughts, family deaths, they will impact a project. Sickness, they can all impact our projects, their aims and their timelines. So ongoing monitoring and evaluation of a project by the beneficiaries and the partners on the ground actually helps to identify the challenges and the changes really quickly and keeps the project relevant and sustainable. So ongoing regular monitoring evaluation also means that final reporting is so much easier as the story has been being told along the way and all the parties have been communicating. Sheila.
Thank you, Noel and Lynn. This has been a helpful discussion to better understand the importance of measurement and how it relates to sustainability. But what are the different ways to measure, and how is it that we know what measurement what measurement to use at each phase of a project? The next natural question then is what to measure, and what are the different ways of measuring? Before we go to our panelists, let's first hear from one of Rotary's service partners, Santiago Mejia at Ashoka.
Hi, everyone. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about how does effective measurement contribute to positive partnerships. And we have to start off about talking about measurements. In the social impact sector, when we talk about measurements, we talk about indicators, which can be a really confusing topic. But in really small terms, it's all the data we collect that are intentional that helps us identify if the work that we're doing really is completing and doing the impact that we're searching to do. So the question always comes up, especially in my years in Rotary, is how do I measure all this? And how is that going to work for me to work better with our partners? So the first thing I always recommend is that do a theory of change. Theory of change is a methodology to really understand what is the last scenario you want to go towards. If I want to help hunger, well, I have to do A, B, C, D. A theory of change is that step by steps. When we have those clear, we can start seeing what we want to measure in each of these paths. But let's not do it alone. To create well indicators, we have to do it with our partners, the ones that are going to be doing the work with us. Because it's the way that we can share meanings. For example, when we talk about change making, for example, in Ashoka, maybe for an entrepreneur, it's really different from working with a university. Maybe the university thinks about soft skills, but an entrepreneur thinks about people that do change in their community. If we don't have the discussions about what's our shared meaning, well, we'll never have a shared purpose. So creating measurements, it's a conversation that can help us unite the work that we're doing. Also, having good measurements can even give us temperature about the work that we're doing. For example, if we keep on doing the same work over and over again without ever knowing if it's the right one, we'll never be able to change. And partners will start saying, hey, I've been giving funding, I've been giving support, but the situation keeps on going. So measurements help us say, hey, maybe we have to change this, or maybe we're doing the right thing here. So it's a way to create also a unique dynamic process of our projects and helps partners understand that processes can change and can give them data to support the changes that we want to do. So thank you so much for listening, and try to find in your projects how can you measure, because at the end of the day, partners will appreciate it and your impact will grow.
Well, thank you to Santiago for his insightful comments about measurement. Lynn, how about telling us some suggestions you may have?
Thanks, Sheila. I'd just like to recap before I make those suggestions and reinforce what some of Santiago just said. Having information is essential for making decisions, and it's for appropriateness and for potential sustainability. Measurement is part of that information gathering, but for useful measurement, we need to start at the baseline, and we need to collect data about what is happening now, and we need to use those same tools, so there is consistency, to actually measure progress and challenges and success. And as we know, there's so many different ways of measuring things. It's important to choose the right ones. They have to be relevant to the project. They have to be relevant to the culture. And they need to be easy to understand and usable. I've seen some amazing data collected that was not usable because nobody knew how to use it. So if you want decent monitoring and evaluation throughout the life of a project and a good project end, I mentioned earlier, use the implementing beneficiaries. They are the ones on the ground. They understand the system. And also in this, I'd just like to remind us, I know it's come up in earlier webinars, but these things, if the projects are about trust and respect as much as they are about anticipated goals. When we're measuring, keep that in mind. So what are the methods we can use? Well, after we've done our desktop research, which we would have done before we've done a project, about the place, the demographics, and the publicly defined challenges and needs, it's important to create that frame of reference before we then create a measurement tool or use a measurement tool. On-ground surveys are the ones we frequently go to, and we know them by lots of different names. These can involve taking content from questionnaires, from focus groups, from casual conversations, formal research, literature reviews, and then collating the data and analysing it. I personally like to start with listening. When I go to a new place or establishing a rapport, I just by seemingly unstructured information gathering, and then through the 5 whys, drilling down to what the priorities of the community are, You can learn a lot about what is truly important to potential beneficiaries and partners. And listening at all stages of a project is incredibly important. So you can have formal and informal conversations. You can sit around in the garden or you can sit around a table. It depends on who you're with. It depends on their preferences. Observations, they can stand alone or be paired with listening and questions. There are structured questionnaires. Now, a lot of people use these, and they're great for gathering quantitative and qualitative. That's numbers and thoughts. So you gather that information for specific targeted questions and open-ended questions. The open-ended ones provide more details, often about things we may not have thought about. And this is really, really important. Our frames of reference are limited frequently. So when we get more information, we need to bring that into the mix and again, ask those whys. Projects will have main goals. And as Noel's already pointed out, you have impacts that come on from unexpected actions. What we need to make sure is that we're not focused too much on what we think is right. So when we're measuring, for example, what sort of data would you need to have to create and actually grow a successful fish farm? Apart from the who's and whys of, who's going to be doing it and where's the land and who owns the project, how many will benefit? You're going to be looking at establishing that baseline, and from which you measure impact, including demographics, catchment area, economic and nutritional needs assessments, existing market supply and demand, etc. For sustainability, you need to involve people on the ground. You need to involve, in the measurement, because they will look at it differently, the fisheries officers. You will involve the market. Where is it going to go? You will involve all those people. The interest and support of those will influence positively what you're doing. So to recap, whatever measurement tool we use on the ground, it needs to be appropriate to the project and the culture and easily understood by those doing that measuring. Noel, given that what you've been saying earlier, I'd really like to hear what your thoughts are on this too. Thanks.
Yes, I agree with you. Lynn, and I also agree very much with Santiago, because I agree with Lynn because you always have to go back to your baseline data, which is already in your community assessment. So always refer back to that document, because in this document, you already have the built-in design for monitoring and evaluation. And you will always use that, refer back to that document, because it will be your reference when you measure them. And the reference should be in short, medium, long term. Long term means it's already an impact that you have created in that community. Now, direct observation is the easiest among the tools. There are no special processes, no formulas to perform this method. Some sponsors are satisfied to see great numbers, happy faces, and they already feel accomplished. It's a good sign, a good indicator of project success, but success should not be measured only by lengths and numbers, but it should also be measured by depth. Measure of success through direct observation may be, superficial, but it should be supplemented by other measuring tools to gauge the impact of project it has created to the beneficiaries. Now, interviews, for me, it has a true impact of the project. It will bring out the best of the project in the beneficiaries. This will measure how deep the project made in their lives. Interviews are in-depth conversation with individuals or multiple people or focus groups in which specific questions are posed by the facilitator to collect specific information. Interviews should be done across all sections of community, both selected and random processes, and do good numbers of interviewees, getting a good representation of all the sectors. Interviews may be cumbersome, it will be tiring, and it will require you much effort. But I guarantee you the data from interviews can be revealing in the effect it made. Analysis of this data will provide the next course of the project and can serve as motivators, as Santiago mentioned in his video, for all stakeholders to continue on. Back to you, Sheila.
Well, thank you, Noel and Lynn. These are great examples that you've given us. But people may still wonder, where do they find support for measurement and data collection if they don't have the expertise? You know, this is an issue for many clubs engaged in service projects, and they really want to design well and demonstrate results, but there just isn't time to become an expert in everything. Well, fortunately, the Rotary World Network provides many resources for us to tap into to find the relevant expertise. Webinar number 3 highlighted a number of those resources for those who would like to return to that recording. And I'd like to ask Noel and Lynn to share their experiences with other technical experts in the Rotary world.
Thank you, Sheila. Well, I have 2 groups in mind that can really help us with this effort. The cadre of technical advisors, in which Lynn and I are members, are Rotary volunteer members around the world who have professional experience and expertise in areas of focus of the Rotary Foundation and also in financial auditing. Cadre members receive online and in-person training from foundation staff and guidance and oversight from Rotary staff and cadre leadership. Now, cadre members advise Rotary members and Rotary clubs who are planning or working on global grants and other service projects, especially on topics like community assessments, monitoring and evaluation, sustainability, and financial management. Many have expertise in measurement, and you can definitely call upon them to support your club to determine appropriate measurement tools and means of collecting data. Another group is the Rotary Action Groups. These are independent Rotary-affiliated organizations whose members have expertise in a particular subject that may include or relate to one of Rotary's areas of focus. They advise on community assessments and how to involve community stakeholders, budgeting, as well as monitoring and evaluation. They also offer direction on identifying partners and funding resources. You can also make use of external partners like universities and research institutes. Cadre and Rotary Action Groups contacts can help you liaise with others to help. In the global grant application, you can include the budget for monitoring and evaluation, which can pay for any entity hired to do the monitoring and analyze the data. Ongoing monitoring and measurement is itself a measurement of sustainability. It just showed that a project that continually produces benefits and continually grow has already created an impact. Over to you, Lynn.
Thanks, Noel. Just a bit more about Cadre, because there's a whole swag of us out there doing this. What we do is help right from the beginning. We can actually help, and I've been doing this as well, and I know Noel has, help in terms of clubs writing proposals so that we can actually look at what you're writing. If you've got concerns, help you in the direction of what is needed to make something that is sustainable. It's how best to measure it, how best to actually work with the people on the ground, work with those who've asked for assistance. So I encourage, as I've mentioned earlier, I encourage the beneficiary communities to actually provide regular stories about what has happened in the past month, and the partners on the ground to provide actually formal, well, their stories, 6 monthly reports about what's been going on. From that, we learn, and we learn so much. We as Rotarians learn, and so do they, about what we can do going forward. And that's one of the Cadre's roles. And as Cadre, we all talk to each other as well. Now, another resource that we all can access, and it's often overlooked, is our district international service chairs and our district resource networks. And I'm laying bets a lot of people haven't even thought of them. Service chairs are responsible for finding and recruiting experts from within the district, and they create these resource networks, and clubs can actually access these people to strengthen their projects. There's a heck of a lot of information out there amongst our Rotarians. And if we think of our district resource network as a huge library or as a consulting firm that we're not paying, or we're paying volunteer rates, then we can avoid spending loads of money on a short-term transient consultant who may or may not actually have the knowledge we need. And as a consultant for much of my life, I can say that. But we can get our own Rotary members who may have professional technical skills and experience that we need, and who are ready to mentor clubs as they develop the projects. The areas of focus managers are also another really good resource. So please reach out to and use these Rotary resources from early on in a project's development. Their experience can help us with measurement capacity and appropriate design. Projects without a strong foundation will be unsustainable. I can assure you of that. I've seen so many of them. And their impact, both good and bad, will be incredibly difficult to measure. Back to you, Sheila.
Well, thank you, Lynn and Noel. We've had an opportunity to hear some of the resources that are available, but there's another question that's sometimes asked. Why should data be collected throughout the project and not just at the end? You know, many people assume data collection takes place at the end of a project. However, if we wait until all the funded activities are complete, we miss out on an opportunity to learn and possibly to make necessary changes to ensure the project benefits are realized. Therefore, I'd like to ask Lynn and Noel to share their experience gathering and using data throughout a project, and what were the results?
Thanks, Sheila. Look, collecting data throughout the project, I'm so keen on this, allows us to understand if the activities are not going as expected, or they're not having the expected result, or they're actually not happening. And the project has to shift its approach or timeline. And I've seen this many, many times. And I'll give you one recent example. This is a complex community project in a remote rural area. It had established a village community group, or several village community groups, for advice, training, and monitoring. This group selected the families to be involved with the project. They could make changes when things were needing to be changed because they were monitoring it all the time. Now, this project required face-to-face training in use of equipment, in gardening techniques, in water storage and use, etc. Then guess what? COVID hit, and training could not be undertaken as had been planned, but it was still needed. Because of this group, because they'd been monitoring, they knew who had already been trained, they knew who needed to be trained, and they knew how they needed to go forward. So they created an online and adjusted training took place, and it reduced the cost. So not only because they were monitoring did they actually know that that was happening, they were actually flexible enough to understand they need to do a couple of other things. They had reduced money. They came back to Rotary and said, oh, we've got less money. Can we please use this spare money for what we need, which in this case is hand sanitizers, temperature scanners, and face masks for communities and schools. This became an integral part of the success of that project, although it was not one that had been considered when it was planned. That's what happens when you monitor and when you measure from the beginning. Noel, what's your experience been?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Like what Santiago's mentioned in his video, the project might reach in a certain point of stagnation, or in there's monotony in what you've been doing, and the stakeholders are quite, let's say, rather bored with their outcome, and they're all probably the outcome is not really what they expected. So I think there's a point where in the middle of the project that we can re-strategize our method so to increase our output and probably achieve our impact much faster. An example is the short-term outcome of increasing enrollment in 4 years old in pre-primary school. The program made an assumption that people will listen to the radio as an awareness campaign to increase the enrollment. But the problem was not enough people are listening to the radio, and the awareness message are not reaching them and or compelling enough to put in more enrollees. So the project was re-strategized, and they were able to produce another method of increasing enrollment by increasing the number of output of radio spots, and for 3 weeks in 5 villages to promote the enrollment. This created the needed input for the project and to make the change in approach of reaching the parents to increase the enrollments. Thank you, Sheila.
In this discussion, we've provided some very helpful information, some practical examples, valuable perspectives, and available resources that we hope you'll be able to use for your projects. Now it's time to turn to our attendee questions. Some of these were submitted in advance, and some have come in during the webinar. You can use the chat function to submit your questions now. Regina.
Thank you, Sheila. Questions are coming in and please submit them. So the first question I'll ask for Lynn, I heard Santiago mention this and I think Noel as well. Someone asked, how do we choose indicators to use for our projects?
Sorry, how do we?
Choose what indicators to use for our projects.
Okay, thanks, Regina, and thanks whoever asked that question. Indicators are relevant to both the understanding of what's happening now and your expectations of and vision of what is going to be in the future by actually having that project. So what are the things that are going to happen? If it's an education project, are you going to be looking at number of children that are now going to school, number of children that now can read, number of children who can now write? If it's like the fish farming project, you can look at indicators of nutritional improvement. You can look at more people being involved with it. So you've got a greater economic development going on within that community. You can look at the indicators of, it's not just the individual goal, it's also that ripple effect. So with a project that's a community economic project, you're going to actually influence not just those within the community, but the wider community. And so your indicators are relevant to why are you doing the project? Bottom line, why am I doing it? What is it I want to see that's changed? When a community comes to you asking Rotary to assist them doing something, they know what their needs are. And we've talked about needs assessments. It's understanding their needs, not ours, understanding their needs. And that will give you the indicators for what is successful. And it's not just about spending money. Success is not just ticking the box. It's about that long-term and the short-term impact of what has been done. I hope that answers it.
Thank you, Lynn. And I'll just add, if you go to the Rotary website, there's a monitoring and evaluation supplement where we provided 5 to 6 indicators for every one of Rotary's areas of focus. So if you don't know where to start, that supplement is always a good place. There is another question, and I'll put this to Noel and Sheila. Who can we partner with in our local community to help us with measurement and evaluation?
Maybe, so I'll go ahead. We can partner with so many in our community. There are universities, colleges, research institutions. We can also use our Rotary Community Core. And my specific example in what we do, we use our Rotaractors actually in helping us in the monitoring and evaluation of our projects. So there's so many ways and so many people that you can ask to help you with this, especially if your club is not really adapted or well equipped in going through these measurements. So there are many ways, and other NGOs you can also utilize that you can also help you with analyzing this data. Well, you can check out the resources from previous webinars in the series of how to connect with these people early on in the project. And may I add to the previous question, Regina, that the tools that you can use also depends on, you refer back to the building blocks. If you want to measure on the outcome, you can simply do the direct observation. But if you want to do further progress of the project, well, you can also use the interviews, the questionnaires. But definitely when you go on a step ladder approach on the next block on measuring outcome and impact, then you should be using much broader tools, many tools in evaluating your project. Thank you, Regina.
I might add a few other partners to the quite comprehensive list that Noel started. Local governments very often are partners that have interest in many of the same issues that we do. There are also professional organizations, whether it's the Medical Association, the unions, the carpenters, the construction people. There are lots of people who want to help. Of course, there are also foundations, local foundations that often accept partners and will contribute some money. Be thinking about global grants also, and how you can partner with people in other countries and other communities. You know, very often districts work together to do a project in another place, and that could involve the Rotary Community Corps and other similar local groups. There are just so many possibilities. The Chamber of Commerce very often is interested in working with Rotary. So as Noel started, and as Regina suggested, and the question was, what are some options for getting involved with other people? And in terms of marketing, that's wonderful to use social media and collaborate on that also. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila and Noel. A question for you, Lynn, and anyone else on the panel. Someone has said, you keep mentioning output and outcome. Can someone explain the difference between the two, between an output and outcome?
I'm happy to do that. Actually, I have to admit, at one point I worked for the Canadian government, and we discovered that Canada and Australia think about these things differently. So it's not surprising that there is confusion. The simple way I look at it is an output is something that is a direct result of an activity that you've done. You can go tick, done. So I've actually gone and bought the photocopier, tick, done. That's an output. I've actually done it. I've gone to this place, tick, done. Your outcomes are actually a reaction to, it's what has happened by all these other things that you've been doing. It's the result of all your activities. It's the result of the changes that you've been putting in place. That is an outcome, and that leads to your long-term change as well. So you've got midterm, you've got long-term, but your outcomes is that combination. Output, you think of it as a tick box, much more. I do anyway. No?
Yeah, I agree, Lynn. So the output is just the results, the immediate results of your project. But the outcome is rather the behavior change that will come out from your beneficiaries, from the projects that you have done. So this is more of the reaction, correctly, and that's the reaction of the individuals, the families, the communities, the groups that you have done your projects. That will lead to a much higher goal, which is impact, which is already probably a policy change in your community and your beneficiaries. So probably those are or I can put it simply, it will be your short-term, mid-term, and then your long-term goals. So to make it simple.
Thank you. And while you two were answering, there was a follow-up question to that one. The question is, since most projects are very short-term, less than a year or 2 years, would it be more appropriate to use process indicators? And I think that means more looking at those process indicators versus using those impact indicators. Noel, Sheila, Lynn, anyone? Curious to hear your response.
I'll follow Noel on this one because I'm guessing what he's going to say.
Yeah, because yes, of course, the indicators are also will serve you as a guide of how your project is going through. It's you can actually in your community assessment, you can already put in your indicators, but of course you put indicators for your output, you put indicators for your outcome, and then a final indicator for your impact. So this will be your guide on what have you accomplished in your short-term, mid-term, and then your impact goals. So the indicators will help you put up the numbers and probably help you focus on the project's path if you are progressing, and improving. And then you should also, as you go along, put in more inputs as you go along the project. So probably you can revise, re-strategize all the inputs that you can put into the project so you can continue on improving those projects, leading to your impact. How about you, Lynn?
Thanks. I was just going to make the comment to start with, and this is something I find Rotarians do a lot, and many people do. A project life. If it is buying a piece of equipment and you're not going to worry about the maintenance, you're not going to worry about anything else, then okay, you can say, the project is done in a year, tick, done, finish.
Yeah.
Anything we do has an impact, be it good or bad, of some description. Our projects that we do, and when we're helping and working with communities and other organisations in our own countries, overseas, wherever, what we have done actually starts a longer process. So the money may be spent, done, finished, but the project continues. And Rotary doesn't actually own the projects. Yes, because we support the people who actually are receiving the beneficiary, English, I can't even speak today, sorry. The people who are receiving the help and assistance from Rotary, yes, they are the ones who continue the process and the project. So coming back to indicators, I mean, as cadre, we often get sent in, I've been sent in 4 years after all the money's been spent, to have a look at the sustainability of that project, to see what has been happening. And I don't go in there and go, oops, we got to get it back to what it looked like 5 years ago. Everything has changed during that time. Many things have changed. And partnerships, it's about the partnerships that are going on. It's about the change that's gone on. It's about the behaviour. It's about what is happening into the future. We are there as a resource and to encourage that sustainability and as a catalyst to enable that. And so the money may be spent, and we may be able to say the money was spent in this way and we achieved all of these things. But the project, I'm just talking terminology here. The project actually continues, unless it is, as I say, buying a boat and you don't care what happens to it, or buying a photocopier. So I just want to bring that into it on top of what Noel was saying about indicators. Thanks. Sheila?
I think that Lynn and Noel, in their answers, demonstrated why the cadre of technical advisors is such an important and underutilized resource. Their answers were brilliant and informative, and they're available to every Rotarian in the world. And I suggest that, as a matter of fact, every action group has a member of the cadre as part of their board. And there are, I think, 500, aren't there 500 cadre members distributed around the world? So wherever you are listening to this webinar, I'm going to suggest that you seriously consider going to the cadre website and find out how you can take advantage of the knowledge and expertise that was just demonstrated so brilliantly.
Great. Thanks, Sheila, Lynn, and Noel. Another question, and I'll give this to you, Noel. How often do we monitor the project during implementation? So you mentioned don't just go at the beginning and the end. So how often should we go? Every month? Every 6 months?
Well, it really depends on what you plan when you started on making your design. But yes, I agree on a very frequent monitoring and evaluation, because that will keep your project in focus. And probably if you need to redesign, re-strategize, and probably need to put in more inputs to your project, yes, so you have to do the monitoring and evaluation very frequently, probably about 2. If your project is going through, let's say, more than multiple years of project, then probably you have to do it twice a year, 2 or 3 times a year. And then I suggest that you do the community meetings frequently. That we do every month if possible, except especially during pandemic. But we usually do the community meetings, and the feedback meetings will help you in an informal or formal way of providing you with the data that you need to for your monitoring and evaluation. These feedback meetings are very important, not just for the stakeholders, but also for the beneficiaries in helping them move on with their project. So frequent meetings, frequent monitoring evaluations should be done probably quarterly if possible. Yes. And then, of course, collect those data, collate them, and analyze them at the end of the project. Thank you, Regina.
Thank you, Noel. Another
And
question. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'd just like to add to that, if I may, and that's and Noel's touched on this with the communities. One of the really strong things that we need with the monitoring and how often is actually good regular communication. And if we don't do it, we actually miss out, because it has to be between Rotary, the partners, the beneficiaries, And this comes back to what I mentioned earlier. It's about trust. So you've got to understand the bigger picture by actually having this regular communication. You can also find out, somebody's mother's brother's uncle may have died. A project is going to slow down because of that. Your timelines are going to push out. If you don't have regular communication, you don't understand why there's been a pause in a project. You may have had a flood in the middle of it, and unless you actually happen to be in situ, you don't know about that. So it's really, really important to not just do the M&E, but to make sure that you actually are communicating. And that goes all the way up the line. You can always extend projects through a timeline if there are other situations. And I'm sorry, but most projects do get unexpected things happening. So it's about that risk management side as well. Good communication, risk management. Sorry, just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Another question for the panel. My club is so new to international projects. How do we even get started thinking about measuring impact? What will be a first step for clubs who aren't used to doing international service or doing their first global grant?
Do local grants. I think you need to start at home. If you're not, please don't go out there. Some time ago, I was actually moderating one of the blogs for Rotary, and we frequently got asked, can somebody please tell us of a really good international project, because we want to do one and we want to do it over here in this country. And the other moderator and I'd go, no, please don't do that. Projects are all different. Situations are all different. We respond to need. We don't create a scenario usually. There are exceptions, but we do respond to a need. And I think to learn, international projects are a little different, except a different location, to local service projects. And if we understand how we do local service projects and we go to a Rotary International Convention, should I not plug that? Meet other people, talk to them. You will find out that there are opportunities to work with Rotarians across the world, but start in terms of process and understanding how to actually do a really good project and monitor and measure it with the ones that you do at home in your local community. And then, yes, please go to international conventions. I'd like to see you in Melbourne, and you can talk to international people about what else is going on. Sorry, Noel.
Yeah, well, we have some good projects in Rotary showcases, which is that's one way of also of looking for international projects. But you really have to you have to be a learned Rotarian to scrutinize which ones are the good ones, which ones are, yes. And then you need to communicate further with them. So you need to learn more of their needs rather than what you want to do as a project. So it's a better understanding, communication, and if it's possible, you can also relate to the beneficiaries themselves, so you can also learn from them. So the specific needs, and probably you can do more improvement and project design improvement on what has already been proposed to you. So I suggest that when you heard of an international project, reach out to the beneficiaries, learn from them, learn their needs, and probably understand their plight of the situation, and then probably you can make the improvement of their project. Thank you, Regina.
So just one quick addition to the comprehensive overview, and that is there are club to club in addition to district grants. And
yes.
One way to do a club to club project is through a sister club relationship. And those sometimes can happen somewhat spontaneously. Rotary clubs learn about each other. They build a relationship of trust, some words that Lynn and Noel have used. And they find and discover an interest that they share, and they work together to create a project, maybe going to other clubs or to their district informally, and that eventually might build into a longer and a much larger relationship, and possibly even a global grant. We've seen that kind of situation develop.
Thank you, everyone. So our last question from the audience, and I will give this one to Sheila. Why is measuring the impact of our service so important to Rotary?
Well, it certainly is important. And I think there have been a number of references to that during the conversation from our panelists also. Priority number one of Rotary's action plan, of course, is to increase our impact. As people of action who are focused on increasing our impact, we must continue to invest in relationships, a word that's come up repeatedly during this session, to make decisions grounded in evidence. We were talking about monitoring and evaluation, and to mobilize our networks to create solutions that last. There's that sustainability word again. Together, we seek to increase our impact by measuring our progress, and sharing the learning generated from our programs throughout the Rotary world, building more momentum, more membership, more resources, and more impact.
Thank you, Sheila. I will turn it back to you.
So as we wrap up, we'd like you, the attendees, to tell us in the chat one action you will take as a result of this webinar. Do you have any responses yet, Regina?
Not yet. I'm looking at the chat. Please don't be shy.
Okay.
Measure every step.
All right. Seek
Nice.
expert
Good.
assistance from the district. From
Yeah, I like to
Kingston.
see improvements. I like to see improvements in what we do, the projects that we do. Even if it's small or large scale projects, we should be practicing in practicing a well-planned project that will create good impacts, good outcomes.
Yes, no, I see some more looking into becoming a cadre.
Oh, becoming a cadre. Hey, Lauren, we have one new cadre here.
From Ronald, to continue learning. We need to continue learning in Spanish.
Yes, yes, I agree.
More attention to monitoring and evaluation.
Great. Yes.
Explore theory of change. Someone says they're going to add in interviews to their current district grant as a way to collect data.
Good. Yes, nice. Good.
Monica says to professionalize our service, so to getting more of this monitoring and evaluation done. Andrea, design community surveys. Wola, getting more advice from cadre colleagues. I think another shout out to the cadre. Sharon, consider how we can incorporate this into our district grants as training and support as a Rotary best practice. Carlos Difundir, talk about this among his friends and what he learned today in the chat.
Yeah, find experts in District Resource Network.
Yes, please.
That's
District Resource Network.
There you go, Kiki.
And actually, you can actually create your district resource networks.
Yes.
If you don't have one, create it. There is no reason why anyone on this call cannot actually start that process in their own district. Raise it with the district and make that happen. You'll be amazed at who you've got in your district who've got skills and abilities that you are not tapping into. Yeah.
Free experts.
Yes, yes. Another person, they're going to interview local students who are working on their wildflower project. More shout outs to the cadre. I think the cadre are getting a lot of shine tonight, which is great.
You'll be surprised on how Rotaractors can help you with the monitoring and evaluation.
Yes.
They're so eager to do this.
And they're talented.
Yes.
Right.
They're very talented. Yep.
They're the more technical people. So
yes, another comment from Monica that she's going to send all of these webinars, the whole series, to all of the members in her district so that they can do better projects. Gracias, Monica.
someone is asking already about the DRN on how to develop it. Maybe Kiki can help.
I think Kiki will respond in the comments about district resource networks. Great, thanks. Sheila, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you everyone for your comments.
Those were exciting to hear about action that's starting. So as a reminder, here are some of the resources that we discussed during the webinar. These are fantastic resources available within the Rotary family, and we strongly encourage you to take advantage of them as you're planning and carrying out your measurement and evaluation activities. We'll also include links to these resources in the email that you'll receive after the webinar. Next slide is about recordings. Another great resource for you is this webinar series itself. And we heard that someone was going to send out the link to all the people in her district or their district. If you weren't able to join the previous webinars, we encourage you to watch the recordings. We'll send the links in the email that you'll receive following this webinar. And we hope that you'll join us for the final of the 5 in this series. The final webinar is Expanding Reach, Partner with Youth in Service, also on point, on Thursday, May 18th. And the last slide is coming up, and that's a thank you to all of you for joining us. Special appreciation to Regina for putting together this webinar, to the fabulous Rotary staff that provided ideas, plus all the things behind the scenes, the technical and logistical support, to our interpreters, and to our amazing panelists, Noel and Lynn. We're signing off right almost on time, a couple of minutes early. Thank you so much.